It was a busy Friday evening at a small diner in the heart of Los Angeles. The kind of place that felt like home to anyone who walked in, with the smell of freshly brewed coffee, sizzling bacon, and the soft hum of conversations filling the air. Among the hardworking staff was Tasha, a young, spirited waitress who always greeted every customer with a warm smile, no matter how tough her day had been. She had a way of making people feel seen, even in the hustle and bustle of her daily grind. Tasha wasn't just any waitress, she was a dreamer. Between balancing trays and taking orders, she often thought about a better life, a life where her talents and kindness didn't go unnoticed. But like many people in her position, she had learned to keep her dreams tucked away, focusing instead on making ends meet and bringing a little joy to her customers' days. That night, the diner was buzzing. Every table was packed, and the kitchen was running at full speed. Tasha was moving from one end of the room to the other, juggling plates of burgers and milkshakes with her usual grace. She barely had time to notice when a man quietly walked in and took a seat at the corner booth, his baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses shielding his eyes. At first glance, he looked like just another customer. But there was something about him, a quiet confidence, a presence, that caught Tasha's attention. She approached his table with her usual cheerful demeanor, ready to take his order. "Hi there, welcome. What can I get started for you tonight?" she asked, her notepad in hand. The man looked up, smiled politely, and said in a deep, familiar voice, "Just a coffee for now, thanks." Tasha paused for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. That voice, it sounded so familiar. And then it hit her. This wasn't just any customer. Sitting right there in her section, dressed down and trying to go unnoticed, was none other than Dwayne, "The Rock" Johnson. Tasha's mind raced. She wasn't the type to get starstruck easily, but this was The Rock. She quickly composed herself, flashing him her signature smile. Coming right up, she said, trying to act as if serving celebrities was a regular part of her day. But inside, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. As she brought his coffee to the table, Dwayne thanked her warmly, and the two exchanged a few words. He asked her name, and she told him, surprised by how down-to-earth he seemed. It was just a brief moment, but it felt special, like a connection that might have gone unnoticed in a world moving too fast. What happened next, though, was something Tasha could never have predicted. A few minutes later, as she was refilling drinks at another table, she overheard a tense conversation coming from the back office. The diner's manager, a sharp-tongued man named Mr. Carver, had noticed her interaction with Dwayne. From the corner of his eye, he had been watching closely, and now he was angry. Tasha wasn't sure why. It wasn't like she had done anything wrong. She had just treated him like any other customer. But Mr. Carver wasn't seeing it that way. "Tasha," he barked, motioning for her to come to the back. "We need to talk. Now." Confused and slightly nervous, Tasha followed him. The small office in the back of the diner was cramped, with stacks of paperwork and the faint smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. Mr. Carver turned to face her, his expression cold and accusing. "What do you think you're doing out there?" he snapped, his voice low but sharp. Tasha blinked, unsure how to respond. "I'm doing my job," she said cautiously, not understanding what he was getting at. "Don't play dumb," he shot back. "You were chatting it up with that guy like he's your best friend. Do you have any idea who he is?" Tasha hesitated. "I mean, yeah, I know who he is. He's Dwayne Johnson. But I was just doing my job, serving him like any other customer." Mr. Carver's face darkened. "You don't get it, do you? People like him don't come here to make friends with people like us. They're here for privacy, not to be bothered by some waitress looking for her 5 seconds of fame." Tasha felt a wave of anger and disbelief rise in her chest. She had been nothing but professional. Friendly, yes, but respectful. She hadn't asked for a photo, an autograph, or even hinted at recognizing him. She had simply treated him like any other diner guest. Was that so wrong? But before she could respond, Mr. Carver made his decision. "I can't have you disrupting the flow of this place, making customers uncomfortable," he said coldly. "You're fired. Pack up your things and leave. Now." Tasha stood there stunned. Fired? For what? For being kind? For doing her job? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. As she walked out of the office, her heart heavy, she glanced back at the corner booth where Dwayne was still sitting, sipping his coffee. He hadn't seen what had just happened, but something told Tasha this wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. And she was right. "What do you think? Let me know if you'd like me to adjust anything." Tasha stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of Mr. Carver's words still sinking in. Fired. The word echoed in her mind like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. Her hands trembled as she clutched her small tote bag, filled with the little belongings she kept in the diner's staff room. She stood on the curb for a moment, staring at the glowing neon sign that flickered above the entrance. This place had been more than just a job to her. It was her lifeline, her way of staying afloat while she figured out the next chapter of her life. And now, it was gone. The sound of the diner door swinging open behind her pulled her out of her thoughts. Tasha turned, surprised to see Dwayne walking out, his coffee cup still in hand. He looked around, spotted her, and immediately picked up on the sadness etched across her face. "Hey," he said gently, his voice carrying the same warmth she'd noticed earlier. "Are you okay?" Tasha hesitated, unsure how to respond. Part of her wanted to brush it off, to act like everything was fine, but the truth was written all over her face. She took a deep breath, deciding there was no point in hiding it. "Not really," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just got fired." Dwayne's brow furrowed, and he stepped closer. "What? Fired? For what?" "For serving you, apparently," she said with a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. "The manager thought I was trying to, I don't know, overstep or something. I was just doing my job." For a moment, Dwayne didn't say anything. He just looked at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and concern. Then he shook his head. "That's ridiculous. You were nothing but professional." I didn't feel uncomfortable for a second. Tasha shrugged, the sting of the situation still fresh. "Well, Mr. Carver didn't see it that way. And now, I'm out of a job." Dwayne seemed to think for a moment, his jaw tightening slightly. He glanced back at the diner, then turned his attention back to Tasha. "Look, I even know what's going on with that guy, but you didn't deserve that. Not for being kind and doing your job." He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Do you have a way to get home?" "Yeah," Tasha said quickly, not wanting to seem like more of a burden. "I'll catch a bus." But Dwayne wasn't convinced. "It's late, and you're upset. Let me call you a ride. It's the least I can do." Tasha opened her mouth to protest, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped her. She nodded, murmuring a quiet, "Thank you." While Dwayne made the call, Tasha stood there, her thoughts racing. She had always prided herself on being strong, on handling whatever life threw at her, but tonight felt different. She felt small, defeated. The kindness from someone like Dwayne, a man who didn't owe her anything, was unexpected, and it made her realize just how much she'd been carrying on her own. When the ride arrived, Dwayne opened the car door for her and handed her a business card before she got in. "If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out," he said, his tone firm but kind. "I mean it." Tasha glanced at the card, her eyes widening slightly when she saw his name and contact information printed on it. "Thank you," she said again, feeling a lump form in her throat. She wanted to say more, to express just how much this small act of kindness meant to her, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she got into the car and gave him a small wave as it pulled away. The ride home was quiet, the city lights blurring past the window as Tasha stared at the card in her hand. She couldn't help but wonder why Dwayne had been at the diner in the first place. Someone like him could have gone anywhere, someplace exclusive, high-end, private. Why here? And why had he cared so much about what happened to her? It didn't make sense, but she was too tired to dwell on it. For now, she just wanted to get home and figure out what to do next. When she finally walked through the door of her small apartment, the silence was almost deafening. She set her bag down and collapsed onto the couch, her mind replaying the events of the evening. The unfairness of it all gnawed at her, but so did something else, a feeling she couldn't quite put into words. There was more to this story, she could feel it. But what? Over the next few days, Tasha tried to move on. She started looking for new jobs, updating her resume, and sending out applications. But no matter how hard she tried to focus, her thoughts kept drifting back to that night. To Dwayne, to Mr. Carver's strange behavior, to the nagging feeling that there was something bigger at play. And then, out of the blue, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "Asterisk, you deserve better asterisk." Curious and a little wary, Tasha opened it. The message inside was brief, but to the point. Asterisk Tasha, I heard what happened at the diner, and I want to help. If you're interested, let's meet. Here's where I'll be tomorrow evening. Address attached asterisk. There was no name, no signature, but Tasha had a pretty good idea who it was from. Her heart raced as she stared at the screen, torn between excitement and skepticism. Was this really happening, or was it some kind of joke? She didn't know what to expect, but one thing was certain. She couldn't let this opportunity slip away. Tasha spent the entire night tossing and turning, unable to shake the email from her mind. The mysterious tone of the message lingered like a song stuck on repeat. It had to be Dwayne. Who else would know what had happened? But even if it was him, why go through all this trouble for someone he barely knew? The questions piled up faster than her mind could process them. But one thing was clear. She had to find out the truth. The next evening, Tasha stood outside the address mentioned in the email, her heart pounding like a drum. It was a sleek, modern cafe tucked into a quiet street on the outskirts of the city. Nothing flashy, but just secluded enough to keep prying eyes away. She hesitated for a moment, clutching the strap of her bag tightly. What if this wasn't Dwayne? What if she was walking into something she couldn't handle? Before she could talk herself out of it, the cafe door swung open, and there he was. Dwayne stood by the entrance, dressed casually in a fitted jacket and jeans, his face lighting up when he saw her. He waved her inside, and Tasha felt her nerves ease, just a little. "Glad you came," he said warmly as she walked in. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a couple of people sitting quietly in the corners. Dwayne led her to a private booth in the back, away from curious eyes and ears. "I wasn't sure if I should," Tasha admitted, sliding into the seat across from him. "This whole thing feels surreal." Dwayne nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it. I probably should have been more direct, but I didn't want to overwhelm you. I just couldn't stop thinking about what happened. It didn't sit right with me." Tasha tilted her head, studying him. "Why do you care so much? I mean, I appreciate it. More than you know, but you don't even know me." He paused, leaning back in his seat. "Because I've been there. Not exactly in your shoes, but close enough. People in positions of power thinking they can treat others however they want, like they're disposable. It's not right." His words hit her harder than she expected, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She'd spent so much time convincing herself that her struggles were just part of life, that she'd never stopped to think about how unfair it all was. Dwayne leaned forward, his tone growing more serious. "I've also been thinking about your manager, Mr. Carver, right?" Tasha nodded, her stomach tightening at the mention of his name. "There's something off about him," Dwayne continued. "The way he acted, firing you on the spot, making it seem like you were the problem. It doesn't add up. and I have a feeling this isn't the first time he's pulled something like that. Tasha's mind raced as she thought back to her time at the diner. She'd always had a strange feeling about Mr. Carver. He was quick to criticize, slow to praise, and seemed to take pleasure in reminding his employees who was in charge. But she chalked it up to him being a tough boss, nothing more. "You think he's targeting people?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dwayne nodded. "I don't know for sure, but I've seen it before. People like him. They thrive on power, and they'll do whatever it takes to hold on to it. I want to help you figure out what's really going on." Tasha stared at him, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to say yes, to let him help her uncover the truth. But another part of her was scared. What if digging into this made things worse? What if it put her in an even more vulnerable position? As if sensing her hesitation, Dwayne added, "You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it. And if you're in, we'll figure this out together." She nodded slowly, her mind still racing. "Okay, I'll think about it." Over the next few days, Tasha couldn't stop replaying their conversation in her mind. She went about her routine, filling out job applications and trying to stay positive, but the questions kept creeping in. What if Dwayne was right? What if Mr. Carver wasn't just a tough boss but something worse? And if he was, how many other people had suffered because of him? One evening, Tasha sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. She'd spent hours scrolling through job postings, but nothing seemed to fit. The thought of going back to another diner, another place where she'd be undervalued and overworked, made her stomach churn. Her eyes drifted to the business card Dwayne had given her, sitting on the table like a silent invitation. She picked it up, running her fingers over the raised letters. Maybe this wasn't just about her anymore. Maybe this was a chance to stand up for herself, and for anyone else who'd been wronged by people like Mr. Carver. With a deep breath, Tasha pulled out her phone and dialed the number. Dwayne picked up on the second ring. "I'm in," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Let's do this." Dwayne's voice was warm and reassuring. "I'm glad you called. We'll start tomorrow." The next day, Tasha met Dwayne at a quiet park near the city. He had a notebook in hand and a determined look on his face. Together, they started piecing together everything they knew about Mr. Carver. Tasha shared stories about her time at the diner, how he'd always seemed to single out certain employees, how he'd made decisions that didn't make sense, how there were whispers among the staff about money disappearing and shady dealings behind the scenes. Dwayne listened intently, jotting down notes and asking questions. "We need proof," he said finally, "something concrete that shows what he's been up to." Tasha nodded, her determination growing with each passing moment. "I think I know where we can start." She told him about an old coworker named Maria, who had worked at the diner for years before suddenly quitting. Maria had always been quiet but kind, and Tasha remembered how she'd seemed scared in the weeks leading up to her departure. Maybe Maria knew something that could shed light on Mr. Carver's true nature. Dwayne agreed, and they decided to track her down. But as they made plans to reach out, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into dangerous territory. Whatever they uncovered, it was clear this wasn't going to be easy. And deep down, she knew their fight was only just beginning. Tasha and Dwayne spent the next few days gathering information. The more they dug into Mr. Carver's past, the more unsettling things became. They discovered that he had a history of mistreating staff at other places he'd worked, with several previous employees speaking out about his unethical behavior. But it was all rumors, no solid evidence to back it up. Everything was circumstantial, and without hard proof, they were in dangerous territory. Tasha felt like they were walking a tightrope, the ground beneath them too uncertain to trust. But the breakthrough they needed seemed to come when they finally tracked down Maria. She had moved away, but with some persistence, Tasha managed to get in touch. They arranged to meet in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. As Tasha entered, she spotted Maria immediately. her face worn but familiar. The years of working under Mr. Carver etched into her features. The older woman smiled faintly when she saw Tasha, but there was something in her eyes that made Tasha uneasy. It was like a guarded sadness, as if Maria had been through too much and was afraid to talk about it. "Maria," Tasha greeted, her voice low, trying not to draw attention. Maria nodded, motioning for her to sit down. "You sure you want to hear this?" Her voice trembled slightly, as if the weight of the past was too much to bear. "I have to," Tasha said, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I think it's time." Maria sighed and looked around nervously before speaking, her words careful and measured. "Carver's not just a bad boss. There's more going on behind the scenes, things he's been doing for years. It's not just about the employees, it's about money. Big money. The kind that can make people disappear." Tasha's pulse quickened. "What do you mean by that?" Maria hesitated, her eyes darting to the door one last time before she leaned in closer. "I don't have proof, but I know enough. Carver's been skimming money from the diner's accounts, paying off suppliers, getting kickbacks on the side. He's got a whole operation going. Blackmail, shady deals, the works. The thing is, anyone who gets too close, anyone who starts asking questions, disappears. Either they quit, or worse." Tasha's mind was spinning, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Everything started to make sense. The strange tension at the diner, the way Carver seemed to have too much control, the employees who quietly disappeared. Tasha could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. But she needed more. She needed something solid, something that would take Carver down once and for all. "Do you have anything? Any evidence? Anything that could help?" Maria shook her head, her hands trembling. "I wish I did. But when I started putting things together, I realized how dangerous it was. I didn't want to be next. I left because I was scared." Tasha leaned back, trying to process everything. This was bigger than she could have imagined. If what Maria was saying was true, Carver wasn't just a bad boss. He was a criminal, and the diner was just the tip of the iceberg. But how could they expose him without getting caught? Dwayne's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that they needed proof. She couldn't let this slip away, not when they were so close. She had to find something, anything that would give them the leverage they needed to take him down. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that getting close to Carver meant walking into a storm. They had to be careful. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. That night, Tasha met with Dwayne again, her mind buzzing with the information she'd just learned. She filled him in on everything Maria had said, and Dwayne's face darkened as he listened. "This is worse than I thought," he said, his voice grim. "We can't back down now. If Carver really is running a scam like this, we have to stop him." Tasha nodded, but doubt still gnawed at her. "But how? He's got connections, power. If we confront him, what's to stop him from destroying us? He's got the whole place in his pocket." "We'll make him think we're on his side," Dwayne suggested. "We get close. We find a way to get him to slip up. I've seen this kind of thing before. People like Carver, they get comfortable. They think no one can touch them." Tasha wasn't so sure. She'd seen firsthand how ruthless he could be. But Dwayne's confidence was contagious. Maybe he was right. Maybe they could outsmart him. The next few days were a blur. Tasha went back to the diner to pick up a few things, keeping her head down and trying to act normal. Carver barely acknowledged her presence, which only added to the tension. She kept a low profile, pretending like everything was fine, while she and Dwayne continued to piece together the final clues. They needed to get close to Carver, to get him talking. But each step felt more dangerous than the last. Then, one evening, everything changed. Tasha received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was low, distorted, and all too familiar. "Tasha," the voice said, sending a chill down her spine. You've been asking too many questions. You're in over your head. Her heart pounded in her chest. Who is this? The voice chuckled darkly. Let's just say I know everything about you. And if you don't stop digging, you'll regret it. Carver's not someone you want to cross. The line went dead before she could respond. Tasha stared at the phone, her hands shaking. Whoever it was, they knew too much. They were watching her. And Carver was involved. She knew it now. She was in too deep. The stakes were higher than ever. The mystery was unraveling, but the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became. She turned to Dwayne, her face pale with fear. This isn't just about Carver anymore. We're being watched. Someone knows what we're doing. Dwayne's face hardened. Then we need to move fast. We can't back down now. But Tasha knew the truth. They had reached the point of no return. The line between victory and disaster had blurred, and she had no idea which side they were on anymore. The next move would be their most dangerous yet, and the outcome was uncertain. All she could do was hope they were ready. Tasha's mind raced as she stared at the phone in her hand, the weight of the call pressing heavily on her chest. Whoever had just threatened her knew too much, and the mention of Carver's name confirmed her worst fear. This was no random warning. The stakes were higher than ever, and she was more exposed than she'd realized. Dwayne paced back and forth in the small room they had been using as their base of operations, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was silent for a moment, thinking. It's not just Carver we need to worry about, he said finally, his voice tight. Someone else is involved. Someone with more power than we thought. Tasha nodded, her stomach tightening. She didn't need to ask who Dwayne meant. There was only one person who could pull the strings like that. Do you think it's someone connected to him? Maybe someone from the higher-ups? Dwayne's eyes met hers, his expression serious. It's possible. But there's something else I've been thinking about. What if Carver's been working for someone even bigger? Someone who has more to lose if we expose what's going on. Tasha felt a chill run down her spine. It was the only explanation that made sense. Carver might have been the face of the operation, but if someone more powerful was behind him, the danger they were facing was far greater than they had imagined. I think we've been too focused on him, Dwayne continued. We need to dig deeper. We need to figure out who's really behind all this, and why they're willing to go to such lengths to protect Carver. But before Tasha could respond, her phone buzzed again. She looked down at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. It was a message from an unknown number. Asterisk, I know what you're doing. You're getting too close. Stop now, or there will be consequences. Asterisk. She felt a wave of panic wash over her, but she didn't let it show. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she quickly typed back. Asterisk, who is this? What do you want? Asterisk. The response came almost instantly. Asterisk, you'll find out soon enough. Just remember, you were warned. Asterisk. Tasha stared at the screen, her pulse pounding in her ears. Whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop until they silenced her. The thought of backing down crossed her mind for a split second. But then she thought about all the people who had suffered because of Carver, Maria, the others who had been treated unfairly, the people whose lives had been torn apart by the shady deals he was involved in. Tasha couldn't let that go. She couldn't turn her back now, not when they were so close to exposing the truth. Dwayne seemed to sense her resolve. He walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. We're in this together, Tasha. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. But even as he spoke, a sense of unease settled over her. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every move they made was being tracked by someone with far more resources and influence than they had. The walls were closing in, and there was no clear way out. The next day, Dwayne called Tasha with an update. I've got something, he said, his voice low. I managed to get my hands on some files. They're from one of Carver's old associates, someone who worked with him before. It's not a lot, but it could be the key to everything. I need you to meet me. Tasha felt a rush of anticipation, but the fear in her gut didn't subside. She knew this could be their chance to expose Carver, to finally put an end to the madness. But she also knew that the deeper they dug, the more dangerous it became. They were on the brink of something big, and they were running out of time. When Tasha arrived at the location Dwayne had given her, she found him standing near a rundown warehouse, holding a stack of papers. His face was grim, his eyes darting around as if he was expecting someone or something. "This is it," he said, handing her the files. "I don't know how much of this is true, but there are some names here, names I think you'll recognize." Tasha scanned the papers, her hands shaking slightly. The names were familiar, but one stood out above all the others. Asterisk Richard Hawthorne asterisk. The name sent a jolt of recognition through her. Richard Hawthorne was a local businessman with deep connections in the city, and his reputation was one of power and influence. Tasha had heard rumors about his involvement in everything from shady construction deals to local politics, but she had never imagined he could be connected to Carver. "This is bigger than we thought," Tasha murmured, feeling the weight of the discovery settle over her. "Hawthorne is the one pulling the strings. Carver's just his pawn." Dwayne nodded. "Exactly. Hawthorne has a lot to lose if we expose what's going on. And if he's involved, we're not just dealing with Carver anymore. We're dealing with a much bigger force, and they'll stop at nothing to protect themselves." Tasha's mind raced. This was the piece of the puzzle they had been missing, the link that could take everything they had uncovered to the next level. But it also meant they were in more danger than ever. Hawthorne was untouchable, with connections that reached far beyond the diner. If they were going to take him down, they needed something concrete, something irrefutable. But as she looked at Dwayne, she realized they couldn't back down now. The stakes were too high. If they didn't act soon, they would be buried under the weight of a system that protected people like Hawthorne. And then, just as the realization hit her, a car pulled up in front of them. The headlights blinded her for a moment, and before she could react, the sound of a door slamming shut echoed through the empty streets. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. They were not alone anymore. From the shadows, a figure emerged, someone she hadn't expected to see. Mr. Carver himself. His cold eyes met hers, and for the first time, Tasha saw something in his gaze that sent a chill down her spine. Fear. Tasha's breath caught in her throat as Mr. Carver stepped into the dim light, his presence casting a long shadow over the street. His usual confident swagger was gone, replaced by an almost palpable nervous energy. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable, and for a moment, Tasha wondered if she had misjudged him all along. "What are you doing here, Carver?" Dwayne's voice was sharp, filled with suspicion and anger. He stepped between Tasha and the man who had been their enemy for so long. Carver hesitated before speaking, his voice strained. "I didn't want it to come to this, but you don't understand what's at stake." He glanced over his shoulder, as if checking for something or someone. "Hawthorne, he's dangerous. You don't know the lengths he'll go to." Tasha's heart pounded. "Hawthorne. So you are working for him. All this time, you've been protecting him." Carver nodded, looking down, his hands trembling. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I was just trying to keep my job, keep things under control. But Hawthorne, he's not like us. He's untouchable. And if he thinks you two are a threat, he'll do everything he can to shut you down. You have no idea what you're up against." Tasha's mind raced, everything clicking into place. It wasn't just about the diner or Carver's petty schemes. It was about the power Hawthorne wielded. He had his hands in everything, pulling strings behind the scenes, making sure no one could expose his empire. She realized just how small and insignificant she had felt compared to him, and now the magnitude of what they were facing settled in. There was no turning back. "So you're just going to keep protecting him?" Dwayne shot back, his fists clenched. Carver shook his head. "No. I've had enough. I can't live like this anymore. But you need to understand that even if you take him down, you're going to make things worse. You'll be targeted. You won't survive. Before Tasha could respond, the sound of a car engine rumbled in the distance, and her heart skipped a beat. The vehicle pulled up behind Carver, its headlights blinding them all. A sleek, black sedan. A figure stepped out, tall and imposing, his face shattered by the night. It was him. Richard Hawthorne. Tasha's stomach twisted into knots. This was it. The man they had been searching for, the mastermind behind everything, was standing right in front of them. His gaze swept over the scene, lingering on Carver for a brief moment before turning to Tasha and Dwayne. "You've been asking too many questions," Hawthorne said in a low, calm voice. There was no anger, just an unsettling confidence. "It's time you learned the hard way what happens when you dig too deep." Tasha stood her ground, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We know everything." Hawthorne chuckled, a sound that made Tasha's skin crawl. "Did you? Because I don't think you do. You see, you're both playing in a game far bigger than you realize. There are people, important people, who've been working with me for years. You can't expose me, and you can't take me down. You're already too far in. This ends tonight." Tasha's pulse raced. They were cornered. There was no way out. But just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. A flash of movement. Someone else had emerged from the shadows. A third figure, stepping between Hawthorne and them. It was Maria. Tasha blinked in disbelief. The woman who had left so suddenly, the one who had seemed so frightened. Maria's eyes were steely, filled with a determination Tasha had never seen before. She held something in her hand, a small device, and with a calmness that stunned everyone, she pressed a button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the unmistakable sound of a distant alarm went off, followed by the shrill wail of sirens approaching. Hawthorne's face shifted, his calm composure cracking for the first time. He turned sharply, as if assessing the situation. Maria spoke, her voice cold and clear. "I've been gathering information for months, Tasha. I didn't leave out of fear. I left because I needed to get close to Hawthorne. I needed the right time to act." Tasha's mind spun. You've been working with us this whole time." Maria nodded. "I had to gain his trust first. I knew it was only a matter of time before you two started digging into the truth. When I heard about your investigation, I knew you were getting too close to the edge. That's when I decided to help you." Hawthorne turned to Maria, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. You betrayed me." Maria didn't flinch. "No, I'm exposing you. There's a difference." The sirens were louder now, growing closer with every passing second. Tasha felt a surge of hope, mixed with a lingering doubt. Could this really be it? Was it over? Or was this just another trap? Hawthorne turned back to face her, his expression darkening. "You think the police will stop me? I own this city. I can make them disappear in an instant." But before he could react further, a group of officers appeared from around the corner, guns drawn. The police had arrived. It was happening. Hawthorne's facade crumbled as the officers closed in on him, his bravado slipping away. The moment Tasha had been hoping for had finally come. But as they took him into custody, a shocking realization dawned on Tasha. Maria had been playing a long game, but there was something more. The way Maria had spoken, the way she had set everything up. It wasn't just about taking Hawthorne down. Maria was after something else, something far more personal. As the police hauled Hawthorne away, Tasha turned to Maria, her heart pounding in her chest. "Why did you really do this, Maria? What's your angle?" Maria's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You'll find out soon enough." And just like that, Tasha's world tilted once again. It wasn't over. The twists weren't finished. As the police car sped off with Hawthorne inside, a new question hung in the air. One that would change everything. Who was Maria really working for? The storm had raged for hours, and the once calm village was now shrouded in darkness. The only light came from the occasional flicker of lightning, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. In the midst of it all, Sarah stood at the edge of the old bridge, gazing out at the tumultuous river below. The events of the past few days had led her here, to this very moment, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. She had come to understand more about herself than she ever could have imagined, but now, faced with the uncertainty of what would happen next, she felt a deep sense of loss. As the wind howled around her, Sarah felt a presence behind her. She turned, her heart pounding, but it was only Lucas, his face pale and worn from the long journey. The two of them had been through so much together. And in that moment, Sarah realized just how much he meant to her. The unspoken bond between them had grown stronger with each challenge they faced, and though words were not needed, they shared a quiet understanding. "You're not alone, Sarah," Lucas said softly, stepping closer. "We made it this far together, and we'll figure out the rest too." Her eyes welled up, but she quickly wiped away the tears. There was no time for weakness now, not when the final piece of the puzzle was within reach. The ancient artifact, which had been the focus of their journey, was now in her hands. It pulsed with an energy that felt both foreign and familiar, as though it held the key to unlocking a deeper truth about the world itself. Sarah knew that the artifact had the power to change everything, but in that moment, she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. Was it worth risking everything to unlock its secrets? Would it bring peace or further destruction? "Are we doing the right thing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas looked out at the storm, his expression contemplative. "There's no clear answer, Sarah. Sometimes, the right thing isn't about what you do, but why you do it. We've seen the damage this artifact can cause if it falls into the wrong hands, but we've also seen its potential to bring about real change. Whatever happens, we need to stay true to ourselves." The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation. Sarah looked over her shoulder to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was Amelia, her face grim but determined. Amelia had been part of their journey from the very beginning, and though her motivations had always been shrouded in mystery, Sarah had come to trust her. "You've come to take it, haven't you?" Sarah said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Amelia shook her head. "I've come to make sure you don't make the same mistake I did. I thought I understood the artifact, thought I could control its power. But I was wrong. It changes you, shapes you into something you weren't before." "Then what should we do?" Sarah asked, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Amelia stepped closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "We destroy it. It's the only way to prevent further harm." The words hung in the air, heavy with their implications. Destroying the artifact meant giving up the possibility of harnessing its power, but it also meant ensuring that no one else could use it for their own gain. The choice wasn't easy, but deep down, Sarah knew it was the only option that felt right. "You're right," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We have to end this, once and for all." Lucas nodded, his eyes reflecting the same determination. Together, they made their way to the center of the bridge, where the river churned violently below. The wind howled around them, but they stood firm, united in their purpose. Amelia handed Sarah a small pouch, and Sarah carefully placed the artifact inside. As soon as it made contact with the pouch, the energy around them seemed to shift. The storm, which had been raging for hours, began to calm. The tension that had filled the air was replaced with a sudden sense of clarity, as if the world was finally taking a breath. With one final glance at the river, Sarah stepped back. "It's done." For a moment, everything was still. The sky, which had been dark and foreboding, now showed signs of breaking apart, with rays of sunlight beginning to peek through the clouds. The storm was over, and the artifact was no more, but the journey had changed them all. Sarah looked at Lucas, then Amelia. They had come so far, faced so many challenges, and yet it was the simple truth that had guided them all along. Sometimes, the greatest power comes from knowing when to let go. They had learned that there was strength in unity, in trusting one another, and in accepting that the answers weren't always clear. As they made their way back to the village, the storm now a distant memory, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The future was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, she would face it with the strength and courage that had been forged during their journey. The village was quiet, the aftermath of the storm leaving behind a sense of calm. People had gathered in the square, relieved that the worst was over. There would be rebuilding, of course, but there was also hope. Hope for a brighter future, one where the lessons of the past would guide their steps forward. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of the journey lifting from her shoulders. She had found herself along the way, and now, with the storm behind her, she could finally move forward. The story of the artifact would be told for generations, but the true story was the one they had lived together. It was a story of sacrifice, of growth, and of the power of human connection. And as Sarah looked toward the horizon, she knew that the greatest adventures were still to come. The world was vast, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she was no longer afraid. With Lucas and Amelia by her side, there was nothing they couldn't face. Together, they had discovered the true power of the human spirit, and nothing could ever take that away. It was a story of sacrifice, of growth, and of the power of human connection. And as Sarah looked toward the horizon, she knew that the greatest adventures were still to come. The world was vast, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she was no longer afraid. With Lucas and Amelia by her side, there was nothing they couldn't face. Together, they had discovered the true power of the human spirit, and nothing could ever take that away.